Good evening and welcome to this celebration of Marjorie Chibnall. It gives me sort of double pleasure to welcome people. First of all, Marjorie was a great Clare Hall person, but also when I put my other hat on, she was also a great legal historian. Although I think there are some people here who thought she was an ordinary medieval historian, but she was really one of us. So I'm not going to speak at any length. David Bates is going to do the introduction about her. Then, God willing, we'll have Lisbeth van Hout speaking about her at greater length, I think. Geoffrey Cass will say something about her as a member of the college. They wrote perhaps the best statutes of any Cambridge college, reputedly. And then we will wind up and we can all have a celebratory drink. So I'll hand over to you.
Here we are. We have a slide which may or may not be recognisable to legal historians and to other historians. This is the nave and the choir, about which a little I'll say in a moment, but this is the nave of the Abbey Church of St Stephen of Caen. The church founded by William the Conqueror and where he was buried. The choir is, incidentally, in case anyone wishes to query this talk, a 13th century replacement for the original choir. Now, we could go from here and say that without William the Conqueror, none of us would be here this evening, and Marjorie's career would not have taken the course it did, but we will push that and him to one side. We have a second slide, and both of these are rather old photographs from the court or the institute. You must visit. But this is the west front, with again the spires being somewhat later, being I think 12th century in this case, 12th, 13th century. But the reason I am starting with this in a talk devoted to the Marjorie Chibnall Bursary is that the moving force, or spirit and force, behind this bursary is Eric Carlson. Eric, who is well known to the college's development office and to medieval historians, who found Marjorie's guidance so inspiring that he wished to make this donation. He is not able to be with us. The next slide takes us into Marjorie's career and also later into Elizabeth's talk, I'm sure. This is the first folio of Audric Vitalis' additions and rewriting of the Gesta Normanorum Duca. It shows the monk William of Jumièges, the first author of the Gesta, begun in the late 1050s. It shows William, a monk of Jumièges, presenting his history to William the Conqueror. And the hand, the script, the hand is Audric's. Now, it is Lisbeth who is ultimately charged with talking about most of Marjorie's academic career, but this has to be central to everything, or at least one of two pillars on which the edifice stands. The other edifice, I'm sure, being the medieval Duchy of Normandy. Audric was not present, well, he was present, but he was not central to the start of Marjorie's career. Her Oxford doctoral thesis, before the Second World War, was devoted to the English lands of the Abbey of Bec. And the bibliography, the list of manuscripts consulted, shows that she visited Paris, Rouen, Évreux, and Caen. And it is in France that the meeting took place which led to the great edition of the Historia Ecclesiastica of Audric Vitalis. This meeting took place in 1954 in the Salle des Manuscrits of the old Bibliothèque Nationale, that is in the Rue de Richelieu, where Lisbeth met, not Lisbeth, sorry, Marjorie, I am jumping forward. Sorry, no, not Lisbeth. Where Marjorie, sorry, met with Dr. Peter Morrison, the founder of Nelson's medieval text, who originally commissioned the edition. However, the other important point is that Peter Morrison, had known Leopold de Lisle, the great Norman historian of the 19th century. And Marjorie has told me this story more than once, and it is in the first paragraph of her edition of Audric Vitalis, the first paragraph of the preface in the first volume, which was the last of the 6 volumes to be published. And it shows, and its repetition shows, the importance that Marjorie attached to the tradition of the field and continuing the field through encouraging the next generation and indeed the generations beyond, because she could look back through this link to de Lisle. It was at the an early 1980s battle conference in Anglo-Norman Studies, in which Marjorie took me to one side and told me that she was pleased that I was working in the field because she now thought that I and others assured its future. This does not mean she was always gently encouraging. There were times at which she could be critical, and always justifiably so. Well, almost always. She was, in other words, both someone with a sense of the importance of, a sense of responsibility towards her field, a sense of responsibility to others working in it, but also a very good teacher. In other words, someone who would say, as David and I were saying before we began, you are very good. However, if you do this, etc., etc. She was a very good teacher, and there were many others who benefited from encouragement in this way. And I am going to name, some of them are here this evening, but of those who can't be here, I'm in particular going to name Dr. Kathleen Thompson and Professor Veronique Gazzo. Marjorie's devotion to her field and her sense of duty was also expressed, very much expressed, by the Battle Conference in Anglo-Norman Studies, the 41st, I think, isn't it, Elizabeth? The 41st meeting of which will take place here in Cambridge at the end of July under Lisbeth's direction. But when the founder of the conference, Professor Alan Brown, died in 1989, it was Marjorie who took over as director, effectively saving the conference and gathering and shaping it for the future, and being ready to take it to, for example, Palermo, something which is unique among the conference's directors. In conclusion, therefore, Marjorie Chibnall's is a life and a career that deserves to be commemorated with a bursary. I will, of course, be contributing. The career and the life is not just one of devoted and outstanding scholarship, but of devotion to encouraging the lives of others and, of course, to contributing to Clare Hall. But in concluding with these words about Marjorie, we must this evening also think of Eric Carlson and thank him for taking the initiative which has brought us here together. With encouragement from the Development Office, which has brought us here this evening. Thank you very much.
So Marjorie was born as Marjorie McCallum Morgan in 1915. She was born very close to the Church of Atcham in Shropshire, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Her father was a tenant farmer in Shropshire, and Marjorie was the first to go to university, and indeed she all her life felt very guilty that she was allowed to go to university and not her brother, who had to take over the farm. And she was very delighted that her brother, when about 15 years ago, her brother's granddaughter got her doctorate. And she felt that the granddaughter somehow fulfilled the dream of the grandfather, her brother. Now, as David already said, when Marjorie went to university in Oxford, she went to Lady Margaret Hall, and her doctoral dissertation was on the English lands of Beck, the priories in particular. And she published a book, that is the book on the left-hand side, in 1946. But because there was still paper shortage, she wanted to dedicate a book to her mother and her father, but she was only allowed to do that at the bottom of her preface, because a separate page was not allowed due to the paper shortage. And I thought that was rather sweet how she explained that. Marjorie had a number of short lectureships after her doctorate in Southampton, followed by Aberdeen, before in 1947 she came to Cambridge, where she married Charles Chibnall, a very distinguished biochemist. And she had met Charles all of 3 times before she married him. He was an amateur medievalist and had got in touch with her because he knew something about the charter she was working on, and he wanted her advice. The 3rd time that he met her, he had invited her for tea in Cambridge because he wanted her to meet his 2 daughters, Joan and Cicely. Cicely having been born on the day her mother died in childbirth. The girls had been brought up by a housekeeper and an aunt, and obviously Charles had ulterior motives in getting to know this young, pretty medievalist. And on the 3rd time that they met, he asked her to marry him, and Marjorie said yes. And afterwards she explained to me, and I'm sure to others too in this audience, that she thought it was retrospective love at first sight. This is typical for Marjorie, that she had this knack of thinking of concepts that not everyone would immediately think about. Now, within a year, she got a job at Girton. And this is an absolutely lovely photograph of the 5 historians in Girton, teaching historians in 1948, with Marjorie in the middle, back row, obviously heavily pregnant with her eldest son, John. Now, as far as I'm aware, and I know the photo archives at Girton and Newnham very well indeed, this is the first photograph of a female Don in Cambridge. So it says something about the circumstances in which the teachers were being photographed and commemorated. Just out of interest, the person here is Helen Kem, a very famous medieval historian. As David already signaled, Marjorie wrote a fair number of books, but I think her fame is based on the edition of Orderic Vitalis, the medieval chronicler, who actually was born in Atcham. So when Marjorie did her homework in an attic room of their ancestral farmhouse, she would just be able to see the church of Atcham, and then the opportunity arose to work on Orderic. She took the opportunity. Now she had resigned from Girton in 1965 because the only way she knew that she could finish this mammoth work was if she could devote herself continuously full-time to this big project, and that is indeed what she did. But in 4 years, and then very briefly, the same photograph that David showed, the autograph of Orderic Vitalis. A very brief note on how I met Marjorie. I did my doctoral dissertation on the chronicle, the Gastronomorum Ducum, of which one of the versions was written by Orderic Vitalis as his youth work, as a sort of apprenticeship. In the early 1980s, that is how I got to know Marjorie. And ever since, she became my godfairy. First of all, by inviting me as a visiting fellow to Clare Hall, and then I'm sure being instrumental in getting a research fellowship at Girton. The interview was presided over by Gillian Beer, who immediately put me at ease because she said, "Lisbeth, how do we pronounce your name, your surname?" And I've never forgotten now because it immediately put me at ease. So the earlier work of Orderic was then published in 1992. So after 4 years without a college, Marjorie was instrumental in becoming one of the first fellows at Clare Hall. Her husband, Charles, having been a fellow at Clare College, and we will hear more about Marjorie at Clare Hall. I very briefly show you some of the books she wrote on Anglo-Norman England and the Norman conquest. She wrote a book about every 4 years, which is a rate not very many of us would follow. 2 more text editions on John of Salisbury and William of Poitier's biography of William the Conqueror. She edited a collection of charters of Holy Trinity at Caen. Now, one of the books, the second book I think, for which she is most famous after the edition she prepared of Orderic Vitalis, is her biography of Empress Matilda. And Empress Matilda is, I'm sure you know, the only woman before Elizabeth I who tried to become Queen of England in her own right. Marjorie wrote a biography in 1992. She always regretted the fact that she couldn't travel to Germany to do some more work in the archives there due to becoming increasingly frail. Now, the reason that I show you this picture is that the Empress Matilda was sent at the age of 8 to Germany, like many aristocratic women who were married off. She was she did indeed marry Emperor Henry V of Germany at the age of 12. And here in Cambridge, in the Parker Library, is the autograph of a manuscript that gives us an eyewitness account of the marriage of Empress Matilda with Emperor Henry V, with a wedding breakfast. And to my mind, this is the earliest image of a wedding breakfast in manuscripts. Very briefly, Empress Matilda became widowed in 1125. Her father recalled her from Germany. She didn't want to come back to Normandy. He compelled her to come back and in no time married her off to Geoffrey of Anjou. this was a mésalliance. He wasn't even Count of Anjou when she married him, and he was 10 years younger. The marriage didn't get off a good start. She returned back to her father's court, and after 2 years, her father sent her back to her husband. They produced 3 children in very short succession, and it was then in 1139 that Empress Matilda, after the death of her father, went to England and for 9 years tried to become queen. She didn't succeed, but at least she paved the path for her son, Henry II, the father of the English common law, and with 2 legal historians amongst the audience, I couldn't resist mentioning Henry II. Marjorie was an immensely distinguished medieval historian. The distinctions came, I've listed them there: Fellow of the British Academy, an honorary doctorate from the University of Birmingham, an honorary doctorate the University of Cambridge. She was very pleased about, but also couldn't resist saying that it would have been kinder if they had recognised her scholarship earlier. She applied for jobs in Cambridge 3 times. 3 times she was passed over for younger men who hadn't written half what she had written, but those were the times. And in 2004, she received an OBE. It is absolutely fantastic that Clare Hall is establishing a scholarship in her memory, and I think she would be pleased to know that Clare Hall is doing this. Thank you very much.
Of course, Marjorie's huge reputation was built on fantastic intellectual penetration and unceasing scholarly work, continuing right into her 90s. Her extraordinary achievement in editing the ecclesiastical history of Orderic Vitalis' 6 volumes took about 30 years of unremitting scholarly application, though it was only one from the vast spectrum of her many academic achievements. But as we know, she had an acute intellect in other fields too, and it certainly encompassed a very shrewd grasp of financial affairs. I saw this particularly at the Perth School for Girls, Cambridge. I succeeded her there as chairman, a post she held with considerable distinction. As chairman of the governors of the school, she was calm, measured, perceptive, sympathetic, but absolutely resolute. For years, she chaired the bursary committee at the school, which met at her home in Millington Road, where the task was to allocate as fairly as possible the necessarily limited school funds available to support able girls with indigent families. She did this without any sentimentality, though she cared deeply about their welfare and progress. And she brought a laser-like beam to bear on individual cases where she aimed at generosity and realism in equal measure. She was good at investment. One would come into her drawing room for the meeting and find her standing at a large wooden lectern upon which the day's Times was spread out and saying things like, "I see Shell is up 2pence today." She had a very good grip on all that. Indeed, whenever I met her, I was irresistibly reminded of Agatha Christie's television creation, Miss Marple, as played by the brilliant Joan Hickson. There was not only some physical resemblance, but the combination of gentleness and logic, polite and unassuming brain power. But as a close colleague of mine once said, Marjorie took no prisoners. 2 reminiscences exemplify this. At her husband's funeral in 1988 in Clare College Chapel, a central feature was a hymn chosen by Marjorie. Its 7 verses were entirely in Latin. No translation was provided, though the hymn number in the separate English hymnal was mentioned. I think it was assumed we could all cope with the medieval Latin of Peter Abelard's O quanta qualia sunt illa sabata, and the following 27 lines of undiluted Latin with the same ease that Marjorie herself could. By the time we came to her own funeral in 2013, a quarter of a century later, the hymn was again included, again in Latin, but her family took mercy on us and provided the English translation alongside. Oh, what the joy and the glory must be those endless Sabbaths the blessed ones see. Marjorie never compromised with the highest academic standards. And these two occasions were certainly the only times most of us have ever been in a place where our favourite Latin word occurred, sympathisantium, observers of the Sabbath, Sabbath keepers. Doesn't occur very often in ordinary conversation. These two occasions, notwithstanding her wonderfully gentle, friendly manner in conversation, where amiability and precision were beautifully balanced, her refusal to compromise on the scholarly standards which mattered never left her, as we heard earlier. She once gave a lecture on the Bayeux tapestry, which would have been one of her medieval specialities. And in the course of discussion afterwards, she mentioned Bosom, which is depicted in the tapestry and is only a few miles from the residence of a friend of ours at Arundel. My friend mentioned in the discussion that there was a very keen amateur local historian who had written a booklet about the legend that Canute's infant daughter was drowned in the mill pool there and is buried in Bosom. There is indeed a grave slab in the church, alleged to be that of the child, but no evidence whatsoever to substantiate the theory. This local enthusiast had clearly believed the legend and had promulgated it in his booklet. Our friend mentioned this innocently and got the fiercest reaction from Marjorie. Oh, that man! His ideas were then annihilated in a few well-chosen words. Marjorie was having none of it. It was an impressive dismissal. My other personal experience of Marjorie's sterling qualities was, of course, at Clare Hall. As fellows of the college on a variety of committees, we worked very closely together. I had been deeply involved in devising and progressing Clare Hall's Royal Charter, and when it came to creating the college's statutes, I found Marjorie a wonderful colleague, and it was primarily while devising and editing the statutes that I fully appreciated how lucky the college was to have Marjorie on board. We spent many hours together, drafting and refining, and I was very impressed with Marjorie's blend of strategy and detail. Her scholarly talents were equally matched by her shrewd and precise grasp of practical considerations. She was both demanding and understanding, and we had a lot of fun producing those statutes. One thing finally sticks in my mind. Marjorie's unique signing off of a sort of call signal to terminate a phone conversation, very politely, but totally decisively, leaving the other party no room for any extension of the conversation. Goodbye. I shan't hear that again, and I shall never forget Marjorie, and the bursary will perpetuate her memory.
Hello everyone. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk to you a little bit today about the Marjorie Chibnall Bursary and why I wanted to establish it. I was a graduate student at Clare Hall in 1984 and 1985. My doctoral work was actually done at Harvard University, but I needed to spend a year somewhere in England doing archival work as part of the research for the dissertation. And I determined that the best place to do that was in the manuscript archives at the Cambridge University Library. Then the big problem was, where would I stay? How would I have the institutional connections to be able to use the resources? And Clare Hall made it all possible. Thanks to Dr. Anna Abalafia, who was then a junior fellow, and the senior tutor, Leslie Barnett, I was able to be a student at Clare Hall for the year 1984-85 and get my research done. Since then, I have been back to Clare Hall several times using the resources at Cambridge University Library, so often staying at the college. And in many ways, I think that my professional success would have been impossible without the incredible support that I got from Clare Hall. I've been making donations through Cambridge in America to support the college for a long time, but I've also been thinking seriously for many, many years of wanting to do something more significant and more lasting. When Marjorie Chibnall passed away, I knew that I had what I was looking for. I wanted to do something to honor her and to help Clare Hall in the process. And so I contacted the development office about establishing an endowment that would help students of history and honor Marjorie's memory. Marjorie was a great hero of mine as a scholar, somebody whose work I admired enormously. And I was very excited when I was going to Clare Hall to discover that she was a fellow there and that I might get a chance to meet her. What she wrote about wasn't really related to my own research, so I didn't see myself working with her or being mentored by her in any way. But I was just eager to be able to say, wow, I love your work. I'm such a great admirer of yours. Marjorie was a very distinctive looking person, and once you saw a picture of her, you knew exactly who she was in a crowd. And so the first time I saw her at the college, by the bar, talking to some senior members before lunch, I went over and just kind of hung back, waiting for a quiet moment when I could introduce myself and just extend my words of admiration to her. I fully expected that conversation would last about 45 seconds. I would tell her how much I admired her work. She would say, thank you very much, good luck with your own work, and I would go to lunch. Instead, when she turned to meet me, that was the end of her other conversations. She stayed laser focused on me, made me feel like I was the only one in the room, and made me feel incredibly important and valued to her. Every time I encountered Marjorie after that, she always made a point of wanting to spend a special amount of time talking to me, seeing how my work was going, being supportive. I have always been incredibly grateful to her for making me feel like a real scholar, someone who had something to say, someone who had something to contribute. She made me feel like I belonged in the scholarly world. And every time I went back to Clare Hall, even if I hadn't seen her for a year or more, she remembered exactly what we had been talking about in our previous conversation, and she would pick up right where we left off, and always with that laser concentration on me and those piercing eyes of hers. I always knew that that was someone I wanted to emulate, that I wanted to treat younger scholars that way when I had the opportunity. She has been a really important role model. So just as I credit Clare Hall with having been important in my professional success, I credit Marjorie Chibnall with having been important in that success too, giving me the confidence to be the kind of scholar that I wanted to be and to feel that I could enter into conversation with great scholars, much more senior and much wiser than I. I have done my best to emulate her as a way of saying thank you to her, and establishing the Chibnall Bursary is just one more way that I hope I can express in a more permanent way my gratitude to her and also to the college for everything that she and the college have meant to me as a scholar. I'm retiring at the end of next year, and so it particularly seems important at this point in my career that I be making this kind of gesture. And I'm very grateful to Marie Jansen and the staff at Clare Hall for all the help that they've given in making this happen. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great event kicking off the Chibnall Bursary.
But Marie, pass on thanks to Eric, will you? I always think it's one of the strengths of Clare Hall that we don't, on the whole, explicitly ask for money for things. But I think this is quite an important one that we can do. We're in a world where funding in the humanities is repeatedly under stress from all the conflicting demands, particularly those that the government places on us. And we can do something to help the next generation of scholars, as Eric was saying that Marjorie did to him. So I hope we can help to build up this bursary. It's something that the college can do, it's something that we can do to assist in this. So it's not going to be a heavyweight beg, but a beg nonetheless that we might all contribute something to Marjorie's memory and to the future of medieval studies. Kimberly, who is the first recipient of the bursary, is here, I think, but my eyesight is always failing in dim light. Do you have anything you want to say, Kimberly?
Yes. Okay, first off, I am absolutely honoured to be the first recipient of this bursary, and I can't say how much of a benefit and what it meant to me to be able to be here doing medieval history as a PhD in Cambridge University. When I was looking at my funding sources for going to Cambridge, it was looking very, very bleak, and I just needed an extra push to be able to say, yes, I can definitely afford to come here to Cambridge, and that I can definitely live here in Cambridge. And to hear back from Clare Hall and say, you have this money and it can help you out, that meant the world to me, and I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kimberly. And it's very good that we are able to give that support, and we thank Eric for that. So thank you all for being here. I hope we can remember Marjorie over a drink. We can't talk for long about this, at least I can't, I have to get to dinner. But I hope that we can talk long into the future about what she's been able to do for the subject, what she's been able to do for us. So thank you all very much.